So the first video we're going to be taking a look at today is by Sydney Watson, and it is called "White Privilege is Still Dumb, and Abusing Kids to Fight Racism is Fine Now?" I haven't seen this video. I try not to watch any of the videos that I'm going to watch with you guys prior to reacting to them, just so I can get kind of an organic reaction to whatever's going to be said in the video. So that you guys can see what I think about it in real time. That means my arguments aren't going to be the most refined about them, because, again, I'm still new at this, but I also don't have it scripted like most reaction videos that you see online. But I do like the organic feel of them. So let's see what Miss Watson has to say.
I'm tired. Aren't you tired?
Yes. 2020 has been a bitch. Yes, I'm very tired.
Hi, my name is Channel. Welcome back to my Sydney. As per usual, this video is sponsored by our friends over at Surfshark because I'm bad at posting consistently. And I'm sorry about that. There is a lot happening in the world right now, but I wanted to follow on from the discussion that we were having in my last video. You know, the discussion about us evil white people. So today we're going to talk about white privilege and Oprah's comments on it and this guy's comments on it. Okay? But first, and before we do that, quick detour over to this other story, because it's a doozy. Recently, this photo went viral, showing a man kneeling on a child's neck while another person holds that child down, and some absolute garbage human takes the photo.
Yeah, that's an absolutely disgusting photo. You see, this photo that we just saw, let's go back so we can see it. This photo right here, is obvious. It's a recreation of George Floyd's murder, but I saw these types of photos all over the place on social media, not by people that I follow, but in reaction groups and tagging groups. I'm a boomer. I'm on Facebook, and they would share them into this group for us to either laugh at or react to, or go and brigade that person's comment section, which it's generally a group that's like a conservative Facebook group that's sharing them. And I saw these kinds of photos all over the place, and it's absolutely disgusting. And this one's even worse because there's a child involved, and it looks like the child is small enough that, one, it's wearing a diaper, and two, it doesn't really understand what's going on, judging by its facial expression, even if the eyes are censored. Like, it looks like it's terrified. This is disgusting. I really hope she doesn't try and justify this photo.
Child's neck, while another person holds that child down, and some absolute garbage human takes the photo. And it has the caption, BLM now MFer, which I guess stands for many fun. Mother funner. Much flowers. Please stop. Anyway, I don't know about the rest.
You see, I don't necessarily hate Sydney Watson, because she does make some entertaining content, even if it's all incredibly vapid and reactionary. She does have decent comedic timing, and she's not the worst person on this website.
Of you, but nothing says to me, let's fight racism, quite like kneeling on the neck of a completely innocent child who has,
or kneeling on the neck of a suspect that hasn't been convicted of anything, which is what the whole movement's about. I don't know.
Happens to be white. Sounds like progress, really out here improving those racial relations. Very good. Now, this story bothered me
She at least has a decent take on it.
for a bunch of fairly obvious reasons, and while children are fairly weird and loud, I still have a massive problem with people messing with them. Children are so innocent, and I don't really understand why adults bring them in on particular issues or use them as political props, or endanger their lives.
That is so true. One of the things that really pisses me off and makes my skin crawl about conservatives is that they don't seem to have a problem involving children with their political messages and political movements. You see this a lot of the time with right-wing protests, but particularly pro-life, anti-choice, forced birth, however you want to phrase it, protests where they're protesting abortion, and they bring very small, impressionable children and have them hold signs and banners that are making statements, either making statements against abortion or holding large photos of aborted fetuses as for some sort of shock value. And they're forcing small children to do this when they really don't understand what it is that they're doing. You also see this with the Westboro Baptist Church. And making them hold signs that say things like "God hates fags" and "Thank God for dead soldiers" and things like that are just they're meant for shock value, but they're using children to spread their message when the children don't necessarily understand what it is that they're advocating for and aren't really part of the conversation. They're just being used as tools, and I fucking hate it.
Yeah, I'm gonna need you to stop doing that. I feel like this universally, no matter what the kid looks like, and no matter what the situation is. I feel this way every time I watch drive-by shootings where kids are around. I don't understand people. I don't know, guys. It kind of just feels like this is Jeffrey Epstein's world of child abuse, and
I don't know why you needed to show a kid getting shot on screen to make your point. That's kind of fucked up, Sydney.
We're all just living in it. Well, if nothing else, it seems that Bill Clinton certainly is. Now, the other problem with this story...
Yes, Bill Clinton bad, we get it. He's not president anymore. And it's come out that he's done fucked up things. I don't see any Democrats, or particularly leftists, that are defending Bill Clinton or defending Hillary Clinton. We recognize that they're trash. They're just not president.
Is that it didn't get any national coverage at all, which I guess goes to show that the media is only interested in pushing a specific kind of victimization story, and it usually involves nooses and fake hate crimes. Really determined to walk that line of getting banned again, aren't you? I do what I want. I think most of us can say fairly definitively that...
So I'm not 100% sure, but there were some right-wing outlets that were saying that the noose found in that NASCAR driver's garage or what have you ended up being staged, or was just the pull cord for the garage door. I'm not sure, but it is kind of strange that a noose was in the garage of the only black driver in NASCAR, and it felt to me at least like it was trying to send a particular message to that driver because they were sponsored by BLM and they or at least were supportive of BLM. I don't know if they were specifically sponsored by them. And in fact, let's look it up. Bubba Wallace. CBC says that the noose was real. They released photos of the noose. Yeah, so here's the photo that I saw around online a bit. And yes, I agree to cookies, whatever. That's clearly a noose and clearly not just a garage door pull that's been tied into a loop. That's very clearly a noose. It was clear that it was supposed to send a message to that particular driver, because that driver was very supportive of the Black Lives Matter movement, which is blatant racism. It's clearly a symbol for lynching. I don't know how else to phrase it.
That had a picture of a white person kneeling on the neck of a black child gone viral, then the story would have been everywhere. I don't know, there might even have been a fresh round of peaceful protesting in response to it. Because we all know how much the radical left like to peacefully protest.
You see, it's not the radical left that's protesting. I mean, the radical left is out protesting, but by and large, it's not the radical left. There aren't that many of us. And she's gonna show some footage of rioters destroying things and cherry picking select events out of these widespread worldwide and nationwide protests that have been, by and large, mostly peaceful protests. She's going to cherry pick footage of people breaking things to try and push this narrative that they were all, violent, destructive riots and were illegitimate. Oh, people yelling, people getting attacked by the police, people yelling, a dude dancing in front of tear gas.
But I guess
Who's using the tear gas? Because I don't know of any protesters that have access to tear gas canisters, and a lot of those clips that you just showed, the air was full of tear gas.
It's because this child has all sorts of white privilege. This abuse does not result in any national media coverage at all. Terrific. And that brings me to the topic of white privilege. But before we get into that, here is my bad segue into the sponsor of today's video.
All right, chill on your own time. Where are we at?
So click the link in the description and your FBI agent will ask you on a hot date. Now, in a recent episode of the Oprah Conversation, Oprah and an NFL linebacker spoke to several white guests who admitted to their racism. Because of course they did.
White people, there are white people who are not as powerful as the system of white people, the caste system that's been put in place, but they still, no matter where they are on the rung or the ladder of success, they still have their whiteness.
Well, would you just look at the time?
That's not inaccurate. That's not inaccurate. The poorest white person on the planet, or in America at least, is not going to have their life made harder because of the color of their skin. There are other circumstances in their life that sure can make their life hard, and does. Nobody's denying that. But the color of their skin is not one of those things. It's not something that makes their life harder. But it doesn't matter if you're as rich as Oprah or homeless. The color of your skin, if you're a black person or a person of color in this country, does have an effect on your life and does make your life more difficult. Oprah could still be racially profiled while driving down the road. Sure, she may be doing so in a Cadillac, or I don't know what rich person car she may drive. But she still runs the risk of being pulled over for driving while black. I don't. I'll get pulled over for not signaling, for speeding, what have you, but they're usually, every time I've been pulled over, there's been a legitimate reason for them to do so. Or at least that's what the cop told me. But there are a lot of instances where black people are pulled over without cause, and their cars are searched without cause, and nothing is found. And it's simply because of the color of their skin, because they've been profiled. It has nothing to do with the amount of money in their bank account. Oprah's not wrong there.
I have to go jump in a river. She follows these comments by saying, "You still have your whiteness. That's what the term white privilege is. It means that whiteness still gives you an advantage no matter."
Yes. True.
Oprah, I'm just wondering, should we consider your exorbitant net worth to be some sort of reparations? Just asking for a friend. Now, around the same time as the Oprah...
No. She earned that money. But reparations are not viewed as just a simple cash payment, at least not those of us on the left that delve into that concept. The concept of reparations refers to financially investing in communities that are historically disenfranchised and are minority populated, to try and give them an economic and societal leg up to get them on the same playing field as the rest of us, because they've been disenfranchised through generational impoverishment and generational discrimination, from slavery to Jim Crow to broken windows policing and stop and frisk, things like that. That have led their communities to be heavily impoverished, for their schools to not be as well funded, because for some reason our schools are funded through property taxes, so they don't get as good of an education, which means they don't have the same advantages or opportunities that people that grew up in more affluent areas with better funded schools have, yada yada yada, the list goes on. It's not just give them money and then slavery's over, like the badness is gone. There are things that we need to do as a society. That's what reparations are. It's not, oh, well, there's a rich black person, so racism's over.
Clip, I also found this.
And also, there are a lot more ultra-rich white people than there are ultra-rich black people, just even per capita.
Other clip, which also discusses white privilege. It's like they hit us all at once. When you say hit, if you mean using anti-white rhetoric to call out your disgusting, immutable characteristic of being white, over which you have no control, but still makes you a disgusting bigot and a pig anyway, then yeah, I guess you could say they're hitting you.
So this is, you know, the dyed-haired feminist fucking caricature right here. You guys haven't been watching the clip. Shit. This is the this is the dyed-haired feminist caricature, sure, but nobody says that being white makes you inherently hateful or disgusting or whatever. It just means that you have a privilege that other people don't.
Why are you using immutable in quotation marks? Like I have some sort of control over it. I have no choice in this. Only black people have no choice in things.
Nobody's saying that. This is a straw man.
You would know that if you didn't have so much white privilege. It's not even worth it.
It's easy to argue against your opponent or the ideas that they hold if you just straw man them and don't actually address what they're actually saying. If you just present a hyperbolic, ridiculous caricature of their ideas, it's easy to knock that straw man down.
You've probably had discussions at home, at school, or at work, and in those conversations, you've probably heard the term white privilege. You may have even had this.
You see, it took me a long time personally to come to terms with the idea of white privilege because I felt the same way that she did in a lot of ways. I felt that somebody saying that I had white privilege was them saying that I was inherently racist or I was inherently bad, that I was a bad person for having this white privilege. And so I took offense to it. I defended myself and was like, no, I'm not privileged because I'm white. That's bullshit. That's racism. I didn't want to accept the fact that saying that I have white privilege isn't a bad thing. It doesn't make me a bad person. It's just an advantage that I have and that I should recognize. And I chose to weaponize my privilege in a way by, even though I have no reach at this point and I don't have any sort of audience that can influence other people's opinions, I might get there eventually, but I've chosen to use that privilege to try and get the message of equality out there. Because if history has told us anything, when a cis white man says something, people are more likely to listen than if a minority were to say the same thing.
Term used in a way that felt like an insult or an accusation. Others will have told you that it's all just made up to make white people feel bad, and none of this is right.
True.
Privilege is a hard concept for people to understand because normally when we talk of privilege, we imagine immediate, unearned riches and tangible benefits for anyone who has it. But white privilege, and indeed all privilege, is actually more about the absence of inconvenience, the absence of an impediment or challenge, and as such, when you have it, you really don't notice it.
It's such a great way to put it. It took me a long time to come to terms with what this gentleman right here just said and the concept behind it. I've said this in a previous video, I worked with a woman of color that tried to explain it to me, and I was very hostile about it. And that's back when I was a reactionary chud, and I said a lot of the stereotypical right-wing talking points. And looking back on it, realized that I was very racist about the way that I approached the conversation. I threw out 1350 for no reason and a bunch of other statistics and things that were relevant to the conversation in an attempt to defend myself because I thought that they were attacking me personally. And, well, I was poor, so I couldn't have privilege. And I was under the impression that wealth privilege was the only type of privilege that existed, and because I wasn't wealthy, I didn't have it. Thankfully, my opinions and views have changed, but it took me a long time to come to terms with the explanation this gentleman just put out, and I think it's a very good way of phrasing it.
But when it's absent, it affects everything you do.
This is all so weird to me because these people act like being white is some sort of fast track ticket through a theme park where it's like, oh, you're white, here you go, here's your fast track to a happier, easier life.
Did you not listen to anything that he just said? Sydney, the fact that you are white, and I'm assuming at this point living in America, you would experience the benefits of it. The fact that you're white means that you're not going to be targeted by law enforcement because of the color of your skin. You're not going to get denied a loan because of the color of your skin. You're not going to be discriminated against because of the color of your skin. Now, your actions and opinions might change those circumstances, but it won't be because of the color of your skin like people of color and black people experience in this country.
Enjoy your ride on the roller coaster. No one gave me a fast track ticket to life. Where's my ticket? I think your parents have to apply for that one at birth. I mean, in a monetary or financial sense, if you want that fast track to success, then you should probably just be Indian, or Filipino, or Taiwanese, or...
So the people of these demographics are in these income brackets are predominantly immigrants that came over to America on, I believe it's an H-1B visa, meaning that they're highly skilled in their given field, and they came over to America to work in that field, which tend to be very high paying fields, namely tech and medicine are the two big ones. So the people that are in these demographics that out earn white Americans are typically immigrants that are very skilled in their career field. You also have the median income of white Americans coming into this country or being in this country. Their average income is also affected by the sheer number of us because we are the vast majority in this country. Demographically speaking, I think it's like 60% of America is white. I could be wrong on that. Let's look that up. U.S. demographic by race. Census Bureau. White alone, 73% of America is white. Race and Hispanic origin, yeah. White alone, 76%. So 2/3 of this country is white. So you have the ultra white people, and then you have the poor white people, the very poor white people that drag this number down. But if you look all the way down here, and white people are wealthy on average more than the average American. And if you look way down here, you have African Americans making nearly half the average white American. They're all the way at the bottom of this graph that she pulled out here. India in pixels, I guess, is the source. Or I guess the U.S. Census Bureau 2013 to 2015, so 5 years ago. Maybe this is the most recent data available. I don't know. But, excuse me, I can't help but notice that African Americans are at the bottom of this income ladder here at $35,000 a year on average, and that includes the ultra wealthy African Americans like athletes, musicians, and Oprah and entertainers, things like that. They're still all the way the fuck down here. White Americans are in the middle of the graph at $59,900 a year. Average Americans are $56.2 thousand. And then African Americans are all the way at the bottom at 35. There clearly is an economic impact. And then you have Hispanic and Latino Americans at 43. There's obviously an economic impact to being a person of color in this country. This kind of kills your point here. Sure, there are certain demographics that are richer than white people, but we're not just talking wealth inequality here. But look at that. I don't know. Come on, Sydney. Read the graph before you put it up on the screen.
Sri Lankan.
There's a good chance, as a white person watching this, your life is already hard. Every day you have to overcome some difficulty or challenge just to get by, but you can still have white privilege. White privilege doesn't mean you haven't worked hard or you don't deserve the success you've had. It doesn't mean that your life isn't hard or that you've never suffered. It simply means that your skin color has not been the cause of your hardship or suffering.
True. Very true. I don't know who this gentleman right here is, but this is a very succinct and well thought out way of explaining the concept of white privilege. And I kind of wish that I'd had it explained this way to me so that I wasn't being incredibly fucking racist to that woman that I was speaking to at one of my jobs that I had that I was speaking about earlier. Like, I was really racist. Like, I wasn't saying the N-word. I wasn't insulting her because of the color of her skin, but I was throwing out very racist talking points and not realizing that it was racist. And, but she wasn't explaining it this way, and I know it's not her responsibility to explain to a white person why she's disenfranchised, and I get that. But had it been explained this way to me back then, it probably would have sunk in a lot easier and not taken nearly as long to sink in as it did.
This idea is so wild to me because it basically suggests that discrimination against the white population doesn't happen. And it does.
It's not saying that the discrimination against the white population doesn't happen, which it doesn't really. But it's saying that your life isn't made harder because of the color of your skin. You're not profiled by law enforcement because of the colors of your skin. I've said all this before. Law enforcement, banks, what have you, you're not going to get denied or treated differently because of the color of your skin. Individuals can be bigoted towards white people, sure, but there isn't a system that is doing that. There isn't a system that is actively discriminating against white people. Individuals can be racist without a system being racist.
The white motorcyclist who was murdered recently for being white. His skin color caused his suffering.
Where's the fucking source on that? Wisconsin man allegedly ran over Marine veteran and former police officer for being white. I think it may have more to do with the military service and the law enforcement service than the color of their skin. There are a lot of people in this country that for some reason hate individual service members. And there are a lot of people that hate police officers individually. Now, I'm of the opinion that you can disagree with the military-industrial complex and America's foreign affairs and foreign interaction without hating individual service members. I don't agree with that, and I think that's wrong. And you can disagree with law enforcement, as I do. And I also disagree with, America's foreign policy, but you can disagree with law enforcement without hating individual officers when they haven't done anything wrong. You can acknowledge that they work for a racist system that is fundamentally broken and needs reform without hating them directly, because there are a lot of good police officers out there that are genuinely good people. If their fellow officers do something fucked and they don't call them out for it and don't speak up, then that makes them in the wrong. But that doesn't mean that an individual police officer is necessarily a bad person for being a cop. It doesn't mean that an individual service member, Marine, soldier, sailor, what have you, airman, are bad people because the American military has done bad things overseas, and American imperialism is detrimental to many developing nations. But I think these two things may have more to do with why they were run over than simply the color of their skin. I may be wrong, but they don't provide a source here. They just throw up a cropped headline.
White rhetoric is literally why this murder was committed.
Navarro told detectives that he believed the person driving the motorcycle was white because in Wisconsin, white people drive Harley-Davidson motorcycles, and that the Harley culture is made up of white racists.
According to the criminal complaint, Navarro...
So he made him, this person, a guy, I guess, allegedly made assumptions about the person riding the motorcycle because it is kind of true that motorcycle culture and the Harley-Davidson culture are largely populated by white nationalists and white supremacists. So maybe him being white did have something to do with it, but she didn't provide a source, so I don't know exactly what this case is.
Told detectives he's been the victim of racist comments from people who are all Caucasian and targeting Navarro because he is Mexican.
Navarro said that if President Donald Trump and white people are going to create the world we are living in, he has no choice, and that people are going to have to...
The woman murdered for saying all lives matter seems to have been murdered because of the color of her skin.
Or potentially because she was spewing racist rhetoric. I don't agree with these people being killed, but it doesn't seem to me that them being white is why they were killed. It's either assumed views that they have because of the things that they were doing, like riding a Harley, or the things that they directly said by saying all lives matter in response to Black Lives Matter, which is fucking racist. I don't agree that they should be killed for it, but that doesn't mean that they were killed for being white.
The child being kneeled on is suffering because of the color of his skin. White students not getting into university because of affirmative action is happening because of the color of their skin.
No, there are a certain number of slots available per year at any given university, and affirmative action means that people of color, and particularly Black people in this country, are given the opportunity to go to these schools when they were economically, educationally, and societally disenfranchised for their whole lives. They still have the opportunity and are afforded the opportunity at success, despite their lack of privilege, which a white person doesn't have to worry about. It has nothing to do with discriminating against whites for the benefit of Blacks. It's making sure that that Black people have the same opportunities and are afforded the same opportunities.
What about America's opioid epidemic? It's even known as the White Death because it disproportionately affects white people.
Okay, that's one thing I want to get into, because the opioid epidemic sure does predominantly affect white people. There's a couple of things about that. First of all, white people, as we just saw, make up 76% of this country. So, yeah, if there's an epidemic going on, it's going to predominantly affect the majority race in that nation. 2, white people are generally more affluent and have more readily available access to medical care. Do you know why the opioid epidemic has become such a thing? It's because people get injured, they go to the doctor, they get prescribed opioids to deal with their pain, and then they end up getting addicted to those opioids because, at least until recently, we're not made aware that these pills and these medications that they were given were addictive. And so they get hooked on these pain pills, their prescription ends, so they can't get more. And what do? They turn to heroin because it will help reduce and address the withdrawal symptoms that they're having. It'll give them the same kind of fix, and it's cheaper to get. And then they get hooked on heroin, and it's a vicious cycle. Because white people have more access to healthcare in this country because our healthcare system is fucked. Of course it's going to affect white people more because they have more access to those pills that they can get hooked on. People aren't prescribing opioids to white people because they're white. There's actually the inverse problem where Black people are not prescribed the correct pain management medications or medications in general because of misconceptions in the medical community that leads to under or maltreatment or malpractice when it comes to treating people of color and Black people in particular because of racist ideas in the medical community that haven't quite died out yet because there's still a bunch of old fuck doctors that went to medical school back in the 70s and 80s when all of this racist shit was being taught to doctors, and they still have those racist fucking ideas. So Black people aren't prescribed these pills because I think one of them is that Black people experience pain differently than white people, and what may be a 7 or 8 on the pain scale to a white person might be a 2 or 3 to a Black person, so they might not need opioids. There's a little bit of racism there, or quite a bit, that is keeping Black people from getting hooked on these medications because they're not being prescribed them properly. Doctors aren't getting white people hooked on pain pills because they're white. God.
What about telling white people to shut up because they're white? What about university campuses that exclude white people from events because of how they look? Or having classes bashing whiteness? Or excluding white people from jobs, government assistance, or other opportunities and initiatives because of their skin color?
So this is a Gish Gallop with a bunch of headlines flashed across the screen without any fucking sources for anybody to verify the validity of these claims. So I think these can be dismissed pretty easily.
Are these not hardships that hinge exclusively on how white someone is? Well, apparently not. According to the Loopy,
if these things that you're saying are true, it's either to prevent white people from being ignorant and racist in public circles, or 2, to even the playing field for people of color and Black people in this country. It's trying to deal with the the effects of white privilege in our society, actively trying to address that incongruity between the races.
The social justice people, and Oprah, and this guy. But don't take my word for it. Let's hear from my friend Zuby, who has some very strong opinions about the use of the term white privilege.
Hey, what's up? This is Zuby, a real-life black man, last time I checked. And thank you to Sydney for wanting me to add to this video.
So conservatives like to do this a lot. One of their favorites is Candace Owens, where they'll find a black person that's willing to parrot their talking points to make it so that leftists and Democrats, liberals, SJWs, what have you, can't criticize them, because if you're criticizing a person of color, you must be racist. So they get these people, and it's really sad because they use them genuinely as tokens, which is racist in and of itself, to push their right-wing talking points simply because of the color of their skin. What she's doing right now is racist. If this person, this Zuby Music person, wanted to say these things of his own volition on his own channel, that wouldn't necessarily be racist. But because Sydney went out of her way to get this person to say these things for her video, for the sake of having a black man in her video shouting down the concept of white privilege, that's racist, Sydney. Sorry. It's racist.
I'm going to share a couple of my thoughts on white privilege, and I'm going to try to make it quick. Firstly, a lot of what people refer to as white privilege is simply majority privilege. If you live in a predominantly white country, then it should be no surprise to you that you are predominantly going to be seeing white people on TV, in advertising, corporate boardrooms, etc. Right?
So white people make up the majority in this country. White people imported black slaves from Africa and used them and purchased them through chattel slavery to build this country, and have kept them as second-class citizens for the last 100 years or more, after finally giving them their personhood, because they were thought of as 3/5 of a person for the first 300 years that they were here. So yeah, the white people are the majority in this country. That doesn't mean white privilege in America is not a thing. In every single country where white people make up the majority, they do have white privilege. Now, if you go to a country where the majority of people are not white, and you exist in that society, you were born there, you may not have white privilege in the same way that you do in America, or in Europe, or Australia. However, in those areas, because they are white majority nations, and the culture has been built around the concept of whiteness, and whiteness being the standard, and anything other than that is lesser, that does make it a white privilege rather than a majority privilege. You do get that, right?
Right? White majority country, it makes sense. If you go to Nigeria, you'll see a lot more people who look like me in all of these places. So a lot of what people refer to as white privilege is simply majority privilege. Next up, the concept of white privilege is actually offensive to white people, right? It makes an assumption of collective guilt based on somebody's skin color.
No, it does not assume guilt based on their skin color. It assumes privilege. Privilege is not something you should be ashamed of or embarrassed to have. It's something you should recognize and work to fix for other people that do not have that privilege. I do not feel guilty because of the color of my skin. This is a narrative that right-wingers try to push all of the time. They try to push that these leftists, these SJWs want you to feel bad about being white. We're not asking you to feel bad about being white. We're asking you to recognize that the color of your skin, your whiteness, affords you certain privileges in our society, and we need to make sure we need to work to leveling the playing field for all people regardless of race.
And that, my friends, is what we call racism. Applying any kind of prejudice or discrimination or making a huge assumption about somebody purely based on their skin color is what we call racism. So
it's not a prejudice against white people. It's not discrimination against white people. An assumption, sure, but that doesn't fall under any sort of definition of racism that I've ever read. but it's not racist to assume that a person who is white in America has white privilege. I'm sorry, it's not.
The concept of white privilege in itself is actually racist. And beyond that, it also sidelines the plight of millions and millions of poor white people. Again, if you're looking at a
No, it doesn't, because it has nothing to do with economics. White privilege means that your life is not made harder by the color of your skin. That's it.
country like the UK,
Did he not watch the video by that other gentleman that she put in earlier?
vast majority of homeless people are white men.
The vast majority of Americans are white. It is a problem that the majority of homeless people are men. That may be a sexist discrimination, but instead of addressing the sexism and saying we need more women homeless people, how about we go with the concept of we need no homeless people? There are enough vacant houses in America to give every single homeless person in America 6 of them and still have plenty of houses left over.
One of the most underperforming groups in the whole education system is white working class boys. So by perpetuating this idea that all white people have this thing called white privilege, it's really not a very sympathetic or compassionate position to take. And it's also a pretty racist assumption, like I already said. Next up, the concept is really offensive and demeaning to black people such as myself. For non-white people, you are essentially telling all of us that society is against us, that the whole game is rigged.
That's because it is. It's not racist to point out the obvious. I'm sorry that it hurts your fifis, but it's true.
That I can never have this thing called white privilege, and so no matter what I do, white people are always going to be superior to me some way in terms of the way they are treated and the opportunities they have in society and in culture.
They aren't superior to you, they get preferential treatment. And acknowledging that, what is the first, if you're talking to an alcoholic, what do you say to them? The first step in fixing a problem is admitting that you have one. The first step to fixing white privilege is for society to acknowledge that it exists, and then we can move forward and work towards fixing it. If we just ignore it because it's racist and it hurts some people's feelings, it's never going to get better, and black people and people of color in this country are just going to remain as oppressed as they are now. Our goal is to benefit society and increase the societal benefit for all people. And if we don't acknowledge the problem, we can't do that.
This re-ingrains a victimhood mindset, and it helps to keep people down. The concept of white privilege itself, as far as I'm concerned, is simply a left-wing version of white supremacy, right?
No. White supremacy means that people feel that they are better than other races because they are white and deserve preferential treatment and want to be rid of people that are not white. White privilege is acknowledging that white people are treated differently and working to fix that. It's the opposite of white supremacy.
Whether you're talking to an actual white supremacist or you're talking to a woke white progressive who thinks that they have white privilege, it's like talking to the same individual. And
No, it's not. No, it's not. Oh my God, you're fucking stupid. Holy
don't
shit.
even realize this. They both believe that white people are inherently superior, and these poor black and brown people are never going to get on their level. And the last point I want to just make is, beyond the concept being myopic and nebulous and offensive to a lot of people, is it's simply not useful. How do I benefit from believing in this whole idea that all white people have white privilege? How do white people benefit from it?
White people acknowledging their white privilege and working to fix that as a society will benefit you. If we change the cultural zeitgeist around skin color, it would mean that future generations interacting with law enforcement from people from our generation that are in law enforcement, they may not have those implicit biases that would lead them to believe that they need to pull over this driver simply because they're black, because they might have drugs. And if you look at my previous video that I uploaded a while back called Let's Talk About 1350, I go over a few different statistics in there that show that black people are pulled over at higher rates than white people in this country and searched more often, despite the fact that contraband is found in white-owned vehicles and white-driven vehicles significantly more than vehicles driven by black people, yet black people are still pulled over at higher rates. Acknowledging this and working to fix it will mean that your children and your children's children won't see won't experience at least some of the same systemic oppression that you do.
What are they supposed to do? How do they atone for this original sin that they've just been born with their white skin, right? The whole concept is stupid, keeps people at each other's throats, it generates resentment, it stokes tension, and it increases division and hostility. So that's why I think you should reject the whole.
Everything he just said there is a fucking lie. This man is so fucking stupid. Holy shit. How can you be so fucking dense? This clearly shows that he fundamentally doesn't understand the concept of white privilege or what we mean when we say it. He's strawmanning it so that he can hate it and maintain his reactionary worldview and not feel bad about it.
Concept of white privilege.
Zuby is actually really cool and pretty terrific, and he's got some really, really great ideas. So I will be putting
No, he doesn't.
his links in the description box, and you can enjoy them in your own time.
Don't
Now,
do it.
I obviously completely reject the idea of white privilege, and most of the time
Of course you do.
statistics completely undermine it too. There are some
No, it doesn't. What is the source on this? What is the source on this? The concept of white privilege is sometimes credited to the African-American writer W.E. Du Bois, but the phrase didn't enter the lexicon until it was used in a 1989 paper by feminist academic Patty McIntosh. I think I've heard of her. As a white person, I realized that I've been taught about racism, something that puts others at a disadvantage, but had been taught not to see one of its corollary aspects, white privilege, which puts me at an advantage. True.
videos and articles that explain why a lot better than I ever could, so I will also link them in the description too. The term white privilege to me is basically another faction of anti-white rhetoric that basically says that being white somehow affords you luxuries not afforded to other races.
Because it does, Sydney.
And it seems that when we're talking about white privilege, we're exclusively referring to white versus black, despite the fact that in a lot of Western countries, there are other ethnic groups and races that consistently outperform white people in almost every area.
That's because those races weren't enslaved through chattel slavery in America. We're in America. You're clearly in America if you've got fucking MAGA bullshit over here. That's our culture. We enslaved black people. White people enslaved black people for hundreds of years and treated them like chattel and traded them, enslaved them, and built this nation on their backs, and then treated them as second-class citizens or not even fully human for centuries. That's our culture, and we're trying to fix that. I don't care what happened over in Britbong land. What happened over here is what I'm concerned about because I'm a fucking American. I get that you're Australian, so you didn't grow up with this culture and you just moved over here and appropriated it in your adulthood. But I grew up here. I grew up with this culture. And it's this culture that we're trying to fix.
And yet we don't talk about their privilege, do we? Yeah, Sydney, that's...
They don't have white privilege. They may have economic privilege. Because, as I said earlier, a lot of those high-performing minorities come over as on H-1B visas into high-paying fields because they're incredibly skilled. They may not have white privilege, but there are different types of privilege other than white.
That's because their race is better than yours. That is...
Nobody says that.
super racist.
It's a straw man. Of course it's racist, but nobody fucking says that.
No, it's not. You can't be racist towards white people. My inclusivity training taught me that. The question is, if Western countries are so racist, then...
Yes, you can. We just don't experience it on the same level that people of color do.
Why is it that there are all these other ethnic and racial groups that don't feel remotely held back? Some groups of people have absolutely no self-accountability, and that, in my opinion, is being rewarded
This is the individuality argument, and I've argued against this several times.
By activists, by politicians, the media, celebrities, and so on. Victimhood mentality is a drive killer, no matter who you are. And if you're brought up since the time that you're a tiny pudding person being told that you're very hard done by, and that your life will be considerably harder because of the way that you look, then you're probably going to grow up with not only a chip on your shoulder, but a certain perspective when it comes to the people around you. And that way of thinking has consequences, and regrettably, it can happen to all of us. It happens to women when
You've seen what happen many times, babe.
Feminists tell them that they're subjugated by the patriarchy. It happens to poor
Well, it's because they are, yet women, at least in my age bracket, millennials, are financially outperforming men. Strange. It's as though being disenfranchised doesn't mean that somebody doesn't want to work hard.
poorer people who are told that rich people are evil for having more money. It happens.
No, we're told that the capitalist class, which is true, is evil, because they are exploiting their workers and stealing the surplus value of their labor for their own personal gain. That's what we mean when we say eat the rich. We're not talking about your upper middle class dad that's got a 401k and a timeshare in Florida. We're talking about Jeff Bezos, whose net worth increased almost $100 billion over the course of a pandemic when we've got 40 million people in this country unemployed. Someone getting called out for being racist towards white people? Yes, I've seen it as well. You can be racist towards white people. However, it's not a daily occurrence for white people. And two, our lives aren't impacted in the same manner that people of color's lives are. The difference is it's not systemic. It doesn't lead to murders. Exactly. True. There isn't a system in place that is racist towards me. Individuals can have racist and bigoted views towards me as a man or as a white person or as a cis person. But that won't have a profound impact on my life, and that there isn't a system in place that reinforces those worldviews. So it's significantly less harmful than a white dude being incredibly racist towards a black person, because not only is it incredibly common, it has a profound impact on their life, and there's a system in place that reinforces that worldview. I do see people saying that you can't be racist against white people. I disagree with that. It just doesn't affect me in the same way that it would affect a person of color.
It's all over the place. And personally, I don't think it's helpful. Of course racism happens. This video is not me saying for a second that it doesn't. But it happens to everyone across all races.
The white guy getting called a cracker isn't scared to walk at night because of the color of his skin. True! Being called a cracker does not have the same historic connotations as the N-word does by any means. But being in an area where I get called a cracker doesn't mean that the majority of the people in the area want to kill me because of the color of my skin. A black dude in the deep, deep South where somebody feels comfortable enough to openly call them the N-word means that a lot of the people in the area feel the same way as they do and could potentially get violent with that person.
This isn't something that's exclusive to the black community. And suggesting that the suffering of white people is somehow less meaningful or less bad than the suffering of other groups is not only intellectually disingenuous, but super lazy.
It's not intellectually disingenuous or super lazy, because while white people may face some oppression, sure, it doesn't impact their daily life, and there's not a system in place that reinforces those views. And I wouldn't even say that white people face oppression. They may face racism, but it won't affect their life in the same manner. That's the point.
Like Zuby said, the term white privilege is used to shame people.
No, it's not.
Because it's easier to pull people down.
Yeah, I don't like this chick either. She's not the worst reactionary on this website, but she's still a reactionary.
Than to build them up. And when the term is not being used to shame, it's being used to score points and virtue signal. Like this photo, for example, where a mother shamed her child for the color of her skin.
She did not. I don't view this as shaming her child. I disagree with using a child for political gain, sure, just the same way I disagree with it when racists do it, when the Westboro Baptist Church does it, and when the anti-abortion people do it. I disagree with it here because this is a child. You should not use your children as political pawns. However, this is not shaming the child for teaching them to acknowledge their privilege and support a egalitarian movement like Black Lives Matter.
For no other reason than to impress strangers on the internet by being woke. And honestly, It's gross. At the end of the day, I view white privilege as yet another divisive anti-white term used to separate us into victim groups. It does very little when it comes to ameliorating racism and does even less when it comes to building up other groups of people. It just perpetually keeps us at war with one another.
No, it's a tool that's being used to fight the racist system and make people acknowledge that one does exist. If acknowledging white privilege was more widespread and people are willing to accept that and take steps towards addressing the issue, it would actually solve the problem.
Personally, the sooner that we stop
Or be an aspect used to solve the problem. I don't think acknowledging white privilege would abolish racism entirely, but it would be a great step forward.
using it and letting other people use it to refer to us and separate us into groups, the better things will be. Now,
Alright, I'm done with this woman. There's like 45 seconds left and she's gonna chill her channel. Yeah, this woman is incredibly stupid. I don't think she's the worst person on this platform by any means, but she's still a well, one, she's racist, but two, she's still a reactionary. She's not even she didn't even grow up in America. So she's not familiar with our culture in the same way that people that like myself who grew up here are, yet she's choosing to comment on it as though she's incredibly informed. And it's fucking frustrating.